Easy, easy, easy. It does not have to be complicated to paint skin colors. And this will serve you well for many, many different skin colors. What is the local color of a skin color? The light isn't hitting the skin and the shadows aren't hitting the skin. So that is where I have my most popping, beautiful colors. All right, focus. All right, hi everyone, welcome back. And in today's tutorial, we're going to talk about some of your questions that you have about painting portraits and some of the problems that you've had and what my answer is to that. But before we get into that, welcome to my channel. Be sure to subscribe if you want to learn not just the how, but the why of watercolor, so you move on your watercolor journey a lot faster. And you can subscribe to my Facebook group, which is here. I will post that there, and you can get constructive criticism if you ask for it on your paintings that you put up on my group, or you can just comment on other people's paintings, and we learn a lot from each other. So I'd love for you to join my Facebook group. That is free. You can also join my Patreon if you're interested in watching start to finish tutorials of pretty much anything I've painted in the last 4 years. I've made tutorials. They get better and better as they get newer. So if you start out at the $5 Patreon level, that's just access to my old standard library. And then the $8 gets most of my new tutorials. And then the $13 level gets really in-depth ones. And then I even have a $30 professional tier. And if you join for a year, you can also get in-depth critiques by me. So I'd love to have you join there if you are interested in learning from me more in-depth. But today, let's talk about painting portraits, because I am working on this portrait and now it's looking a lot better, but it looked really scary when I first started it. I would be sure that if you were a beginner and you're starting your portrait out like I was an experienced painter, and I still freaked out. And I still freak out all the time. I talk about that a lot on this channel, but it definitely happened with this one, and I really was scared because this is such an important painting. It's a commission. I was starting it on his birthday, which was Friday, just a few days ago. I posted that on my community tab. Be sure to go check out my community tab where I posted this, and I asked for your questions, which today I'm going to answer. So I'm going to answer your most pressing questions about how to paint portraits and the common problems you have. And the first question I got was basically, how do you not get lost? Like the most important little corners of the mouth or the eye folds or whatever, important but tiny little details that even if you move it a millimeter, it changes the personality of the person you're painting. How do you avoid that problem? And one of the things that I do is I do what's called mapping. And to map, while I can still see the pencil lines, I will paint in the corners of the mouth and the corners of the eye and the nostrils and some of the darker features, usually like where the ears meet the neckline and details like that, that as I cover my drawing up with more and more paint, I'll lose my line drawing and I have to rely on my drawing skills. So one answer is do your map when you first start and get the most important details in, some of the darker, smaller details that will kind of hold down your drawing and the proportions and where they go in relation to each other, kind of like paperweights, so that as you paint, you'll still be able to see those features and not get lost in your painting and lose the personality of the person. And just remember with watercolor, when you paint something dark, let it dry completely and then paint over it. It will maintain its shape and you can still see it under subsequent layers of paint. That's part of watercolor being transparent. So that is what I do very commonly. The other thing that I do to address this problem is tons and tons of adjusting. Painting watercolor portraits is all about making tons of adjustments, especially as you get into this stage of the painting. I'm going to show you how to use this scrubber. So you wait till your paper is bone dry. Also, it helps to have less staining paint that you're working with. Another thing that's helpful is to work on good paper like Arches cold press or bow hung. Hand mule the collection takes a little bit of scrubbing, not a ton. And so I have my Royal & Langnickel size 2 stiff scrubber here. If this was more delicate paper, I'd use a soft scrubber, which they make as well. And I got something to blot with, and I've got clean, clear water on my brush. So this is dry. My scrubber is pretty damp. And I'm just gonna, you know how you get those little hard edges? This is a great way to gently get rid of those and also soften this edge. And you see how that got rid of that hard edge. Now, if I wanted to move some paint back in the area, I can just kind of reactivate all this and kind of smooth it over, and that seems to work well for me as well. Okay, so I also use this to kind of move paint around once I've scrubbed it and activated everything. Then I use it to also move things around. All right, and then he's got this little purple thing on his nose that doesn't belong there, so you can fix little tiny mistakes like that as well. And soften this edge. And kind of move paint around here too. Just kind of get rid of that edge. And then there's like a little very light lip liner too here. That I'm just gonna put in. And this just makes it so nice and soft looking where there were hard edges, and it looks a lot more natural, like a person actually looks. People don't usually have a lot of hard edges in their face. And I'll go back in and paint over some of this. All right, let's look at Rembrandt edges. By the way, for those of you new to my content, what are Rembrandt edges? The Rembrandt principle was coined by James Gurney, who has an amazing YouTube channel, by the way, and he has a couple books. And in his book, Imaginative Realism by James Gurney, he talks about the Rembrandt principle, and he actually calls it the windmill principle. And he talks about how in the painting by Rembrandt of the windmill, the blades have 4 different value pairings: light on light, dark on light, and dark on dark. So light blade on dark background, light blade on light background, dark blade on light background, and dark blade on dark background. So this principle is amazeballs. Thank you, James Gurney, forever. This is the best thing I learned in 2022. I made a video about it, and I will link that here if I can. And by the way, when I link a video, it doesn't take you out of the video. It just will queue it up for you to watch after this video is over. So you can use the windmill principle on not just the whole subject, which we'll look at in a minute, but parts of the subject. All right, so for example, in fact, that makes me see a place where I could have a light on light Rembrandt edge. And if you have a good reference, it will give you these windmill principle pairings usually when your picture is well lit. So here is a light part of the ear on a light part of the face, and I'm going to scrub it to even enhance the disappearing edge here. And if you look at the reference, it's also a very light area. So I used my stiff scrubber to lighten that. So here's light ear on light background. Darker ear, and I could fix this to be dark on dark, because indeed in my reference it's dark ear on dark background, which is his hair. Dark on dark, light on light, light on dark right here. Dark hair against light little sliver of ear right there. And then let's see if we have dark on light right here where the ear meets the light visor strap. That could be, it's a medium, but you don't have to have it perfect. And here's dark ear. Actually, here's dark ear on light background. So we have all 4 of the value pairings, and it's because we chose a good reference, a well-lit reference to work from. I can't emphasize how important that is. Let's look at the eye. We have light on light, which is this fold of his eye is getting hit by the light. So that could be called a light on light. Dark on dark, because his corner is dark and it's coming up against these dark shadows. Light on dark. See, his light iris is against a darker area of his skin. And you could even do medium on medium and it really looks good. Let's look at the nose. Light, here's some light part of the nose on dark background. Light on light right here with his cheek. And the reference has a very good disappearing edge, more so than what I have. I could even scrub this edge with my little stiff scrubber by Royal & Langnickel, and it will look even more painterly. So if you really look at your reference and look for your Rembrandt edges, your reference photo will tell you where to put your Rembrandt edges. See right here, his nose totally disappears with his cheek. So there we go. Dark on dark here, light on light, light on dark, and dark tip on light here. All right, now let's look at the whole picture. We have dark on light, light on light, light little, and you can even have little slivers of light on light here, light on light. This is kind of a lighter area on his head on light, and I could scrub this out to make it look more painterly. Light area over here on light, light on dark. This shadow came down to hit this light, and then I could make this background a little darker if I wanted to really pop him out. I'm afraid to do that because the client's actually happy with how it looks, and so am I. But here's a darker purple right here on light sheet. This is a light on light here. So we have dark on light, light on dark, light on light, light on light, light on light, dark on dark. So yes, we have all 4 pairings of the windmill principle. And I have found if you even just get 2 or 3 of the windmill principle pairings, you're doing good. I will also say this, the way to make it easier on yourself to find windmill principle edges is to make your painting practice better as a whole, because if you start painting this way, you're going to make a point of not painting everything in medium values like a lot of beginners do. And I was just looking at this painting by an intermediate painter. And thank you, Subrata Basu, for sharing this image for this video. And I'm so sorry if I'm butchering your name. Let's talk about all the things that make this a wonderful painting before we talk about how it could be strengthened even more with the windmill principle. I think my favorite thing about this painting is how Subrata put in the flags and then used those same colors sprinkled throughout the painting, namely in the people, to pull the composition together. I also love how the road curves and directs the viewer into the painting and through the painting. I think the cropping is very nice with a nice variety of large, small, and medium shapes to give the painting a strong abstract design. I think the rounded organic shapes of the trees really balance nicely with the straight lines of the buildings too. Now let's talk about how he could use the windmill principle to strengthen his painting. I noticed that he had a lot of medium values. It was a landscape with trees with all medium values, and the sky behind the trees were all light values. So it gave him very little opportunity to have these Rembrandt pairings, these windmill principle pairings. If he would have put lights, mediums, and darks in his sky and lights, mediums, and darks in his trees and used a reference photo that gave him this good information that he didn't have to make up a lot by himself, it would have been a lot easier to get all these pairings using the windmill principle. So that's just something to think about. That's why it's so imperative to work from a good reference photo when you're working in this realistic style. If you want a realistic yet dreamy style, the way to do it is a good reference photo that gives you your windmill principle values that you can then work with and put them in your painting. All right, next question. This is fun. Backgrounds are always hard for me. If I do the portrait first, then I'm terrified I'll ruin it with bad background. That is a whole can of worms. I did a whole video very recently. I will link that here. And by the way, when you click these videos, it won't take you out of the video. It'll just queue it up for you to watch later. I did a whole video on backgrounds. Be sure to watch my video about backgrounds. Okay, another person had a question about hard and soft edges. Where do you decide where to put hard edges and where do you decide to put soft edges? Charles Reed says you should have half hard edges and half soft or disappearing edges. And so a hard edge is obviously where there's a very clear, hard delineation between edges, like the edge of his cheek and the background is hard. Where you would have a soft edge is like, say, his dark hair against the dark background, so that makes that edge disappear. And so the places that you put soft or disappearing edges usually is in the shadows and or less important places. Like for this guy, a less important place will be along the edge of this shirt here, maybe along his hairline. I'll put some dark right in here to pop out his shirt, but also have a dark on dark edge on his hair. And this is behind him, so this is not an area of interest. This is the area of interest. So I want my hardest edges in this area around his eyes and where the light is hitting the side of his face. And I really accentuated the lights in his face compared to the reference photo. And the way that I did that was that I used reference material other than that supplied by the client. I looked in a book. I found a picture by, what's his name? Mel Staben, where he painted a very similar person with similar colors. And so I relied on that for ideas on how to do edges. And I also looked at another painting by Mel Staben, and that's actually how I did it. I looked at two different paintings by an artist who I really admired to get ideas for colors and edges. But thanks to Mel Staben, I have an idea of what I'm gonna try to do with the color and the light. And Mel Staben in his book has this beautiful picture here of a man in really pretty light captured with beautiful color. And I'm gonna try to kind of emulate the color in this. It's just so pretty. And if I fail, it's just a piece of paper. I will try again. And so I'm going to use this book. I'm going to have it open to this page. And it's so perfect because this guy's even wearing a hat like Casey's wearing a visor in this picture. And he's facing in complete side profile, whereas I'm going to be painting Casey in 3/4 view. This is called 3/4 view, and it's actually, when you're painting a portrait, one of the best ways to pose your model if you have that luxury, because in 3/4 view you can see the components of the face in a more 3D way, meaning you see the nose and then this cheek is behind the nose, and it's obvious that it's got dimension just because it's not looking straight, the person isn't looking straight at you, which would flatten out their face. Or a side view like this also tends to look more flat. But when the person or the cat or the dog or the animal or whatever you're painting, even a flower is at 3/4 view, it adds a dimension of interest because it better shows the 3D dimension quality of what you're painting. And often, if you have good light, that 10x's the quality of the reference and how it will look 3D and more interesting if you have good light. Now, I don't have great light in this photo, but I do have other pictures that I can look at. Like, for example, this woman is in 3/4 view, so I can see where the light hits her, and you better believe I'll be using this picture of a woman just to see how the light falls on her features, to see where I need to keep the lightest areas on Casey's face. So these two pictures, this picture and this picture alone, are really going to help me, I think, plan how I go as I move through the process of this painting. The front of the face almost always is going to be almost all hard edges. There's going to be a soft edge between his forehead and the shadow of the hat. So this will get softened, this edge along here, but where his eyes are and this edge of his face, those are going to be hard edges. Here I've got a soft edge where I've got a light purple against a light purple background, and it's causing a disappearing edge right here on his shoulder. His collar is super white, so I'll probably make that a hard edge because it will direct the viewer up into the painting, because this line is pointing the viewer's eye up into the painting, which I like. It'll feed it right up through the curve of his visor and around to these beautiful hard edges with a lot of detail. Okay, I got interrupted by my husband and my son coming home from school yesterday, and so it's another 24 hours later, so I'm in a new outfit. All right, let's see what other questions we have. Highlight and shading. Oh, and base color for skin. This is something that a lot of beginners don't understand, and it's that it's not so important your color, it's your values. Yes, a brown leaning skin color is gonna be different than a super Caucasian, super light, freckly, redheaded Caucasian person. That will be different, but you could paint those same skin tones with the same 3 tubes of paint. A good blue that mixes well with both yellow and red. A good yellow that mixes really well with blue and red. And a good yellow that mixes good with the other 2 primaries. So they all mix well together. That means they're probably pretty pure primaries. I am not a big fan personally. I get why. To use it to get really popping colors, especially if you're painting flowers, you need color pops to do the split primary palette where you have a cool blue and a warm blue and a cool red and a warm red and a cool yellow and a warm yellow. That just kind of blows my mind. Personally, I like to have a blue I like, a red, and a yellow, and I like them all to mix well together. And I can mix any color from those. And let's do a little bit of color mixing. I will say mixing skin colors is the least hard part of getting a portrait to look good. The more important thing to pay attention to is values, the lights, mediums, and darks, and how they hang in relation to each other and getting them balanced in relation to each other. That's a lot more important than getting your colors right. You can have a more orange leaning skin or yellow or red or blue or whatever. It's still going to read skin. It's still going to look right if you have a basic color correct. It doesn't have to be spot on, exactly mixed, exactly matching your picture, your reference. What's more important is to get pretty close to what your reference tells you to do with values. But a lot of you still really want to know about mixing colors. Like I said, I use a yellow, a red, and a cool. Sometimes I use Winsor Violet instead of blue to mix. All right, but here's Holbein Aureolin. Here's Naphthol Red. And that is a skin color. Now, what happens if we add a little bit of blue, a little bit of Winsor Violet to that mix? Now we have a black or a brown skin tone, and I just added a tiny bit of purple to that. What if we add more red to that? Or more yellow? So just adding tiny bits of different colors, you'll get all the ranges you need. Also, this is a shadow color for this color. So when you have a mix of a flat orange, say for a Caucasian skin color, just add a little bit of purple, and now you've got the shadow color. And use the same puddle of paint to keep mixing to go back to the more orange color. Add more water to the same puddle. Here's a lighter area. And then don't add more water, add more paint. Now you have a super dark area. Add purple to that, and you have a very dark, where the darkest shadows are. That's what you can do to get all the ranges of skin colors. And then, of course, for super light areas, you're just going to go really tea consistency. How do you tell if it's tea consistency? It drips readily like this. It's running. That's tea consistency. That's for the lightest areas. Now, don't mess with your brush. Don't add any more water. Just add more pigment. Now you've got milk consistency. And that's for mediums. Now add more paint to your same puddle, but don't add water.
Now you've got cream consistency for the darkest. So you can just work from the same puddle and just add a little bit of this, a little bit of that, according to what you need. Now for the brightest areas, you might want to work with really clean palette. So say you wanted to paint the local color. What is the local color of a skin color? It's usually a pretty pure orange for a Caucasian color, like that. This is where the light isn't hitting the skin and the shadows aren't hitting the skin. That's where you find the actual color of the thing. That's what we call local color. So there's your local color. That's about milk consistency. I have a whole series I did on techniques with milk, cream, and tea consistency. I will link to that playlist here. So this is simple. And these colors all would work for a white person, a brown person, all kinds of different skin colors. They will read correctly if you get your values right. So don't stress. Another way that I saw someone mix colors that I love, that I want to play with more, is using cerulean to cool down skin colors, but not darken them. So there's our straight orange, and let's add a little bit of cerulean to cool it off. And there's more of a shadow area, or a more natural skin color. You don't want your skin color to look neon orange. And that's why the only place that you put a pure orange for like a white skin tone would be in the midtones, where the light's not hitting it, where it's super light, and not where the shadow's hitting, where it's super dark. Now, let's give some brown skin colors some more attention here. So you can use orange as your base still, and you just add a little bit more purple, right? For a darker skin and also less water. Get those values right, okay? There is a beautiful chocolate glowing skin color, just gorgeous. And if you put some red in it for maybe a redder cheek, which I've done that recently on my, I did a beautiful tutorial that I loved of a child named Abu. He's from Zanzibar, and that's a color combination I used a lot, was the purple and the yellow and the red, and then put highlights of this red in his skin. It's just gorgeous. So you can use purple to cool down your orange mix. You can use cobalt. You can use cerulean. You can use any blue. I don't recommend phthalo blue because it's just too staining and you won't be able to manipulate it. Another color that's beautiful for brown skin tones I found is have a base, if you really want to go easy on yourself, is burnt sienna. That's a good basic color for brown skin tones. There you go. Boom. You don't even have to do much. And then for cooler areas, you just add in purple, and there's your shadows. And then you rinse out your brush. There's your where the light is hitting the skin. Here's where you've got your local color, and here's your shadow area. Easy, easy, easy. It does not have to be complicated to paint skin colors. And this will serve you well for many, many different skin colors.
The highlight is created by the light hitting that subject very directly in that area. And then in your medium area that you move a little bit away from that highlight, that's where you get your local color. Local color meaning the real color of the thing, not affected by how the light's hitting it. So that is where I have my most popping, beautiful colors. That's an opportunity to have your brightest colors. Here it's pretty orange. It's pretty just red and yellow, pure red and yellow. I did not add any cool blues or purples there. So that is a pure color, about milk consistency. And then as you move into the darker shadows, it gets cooler and or grayer. So I have a lot more purple mixed into this area. But I was saying it's not so much the color, it's the value. So here is really dark, and add a lot of purple in the hollow of his eye. Here's really light. Here's really medium. And then as the painting progresses, it gets more and more important as you get towards the ending stage to adjust your values in relation to each other. So if I decide to put a little bit more color on this super light highlight on his nose, that probably means I would have to darken some other things over in here. So you're always having to balance out values in relation to each other as you finish the painting. That's so important. So if I didn't answer any of your questions or you have more questions now, I would love to hear them. And I reply to all my comments, especially questions and things like that. So you are welcome to put questions in the comments and I would love to hear what you have to ask me. And I will probably be putting this on my Patreon. I'm not sure what tier it will go into. It might be the $30 professional tier because this is a professional level painting. It's a high-end commission that's I'm charging a decent amount for, and it's a pretty serious painting. So I will probably put it in my $30 tier, which is a professional level tier. And I only have about 2 other paintings that were juried into national shows. So for any painting that I get juried into a national show, I'm putting those tutorials in that tier. So join at the $30 tier for that. But otherwise, if you join at the $5 tier, you get not many new tutorials, quite a bit of sneak peeks, but $5 tier is just my library of older tutorials. $8 tier is most of my tutorials. And then I'm doing these highly edited, like Sam the Tuxedo Cat. And in fact, he's the sponsor of this video. So let's take a look at Sam the Tuxedo Cat. And by the way, just because this is a cat, you will learn so much basic good information about watercolor painting in this tutorial. It will blow your mind. Just watch this, you'll see. Roll 'em. One of my students showed me her notebook that she made just about everything that she was learning from my tutorial because it was a little overwhelming. They're almost like courses, which normally would cost $200. So yeah, it is a good deal for you to get it at just the $8 level. And that is why soon it will move to the $13 and maybe even the $30 tiers. And there's over 100 other tutorials that are available. I've left a lot of my older tutorials at the $5 Patreon level. You will learn a lot about watercolor painting and it will help you create your own style. Thanks Sam the Tuxedo for sponsoring this video. And I hope you will come join my Facebook group, which is free. And I will put that link here again. And you can also join my Patreon if you'd like to learn from me more in depth. Oh, join my Patreon for a year if you would like in-depth critiques. And I will see you in the next video tutorial. Thanks so much for watching. Now go watercolor your world. Bye everybody. Testing, testing, 1, 2, 3. Testing, testing, 1, 2, 3. Hello everyone. I just realized I wasn't recording and my son's going to get home in 15 minutes. Ah! Anyway, good. Okay, let's record this again. All right, focus. All right, hi everyone, welcome back. And